How many generations were there from Adam to Abraham in the Bible? Now, you've no doubt heard of the name Adam, first man Adam, and Abraham, the father of the faith. You've heard of Noah, but do you remember the names Lamech or Methuselah, Arpachshad, Reu, Serug, some of these names? Well, there are many of the patriarchs that existed between Adam all the way down to Abraham. If you want to find out just how many, stay tuned. Let's get into it. Thank you for tuning in. I love to talk about Abraham and to dive into some of the details of the Bible. As we look at the account in Genesis, specifically chapters 5 and 11, we receive an accounting, a genealogical accounting of the fathers from Adam down to Noah through the flood, and from Shem down to Abram, that recounts how many of the patriarchs lived and existed and had families between these two great patriarchs. Not only are we going to learn a little bit about how many there were, but we're going to learn a little bit about the meaning of some of their names and the lives that some of them lived. Now, in one of our other episodes, we've talked about the ages of the patriarchs, and you can click here to learn a little bit more about that. But in this one, we're going to specifically focus on who they were and what their names meant. All right, let's start at the beginning. So, before the flood, we had 10 patriarchs from Adam down to Noah. These were Adam, Seth, Enos, Canaan, Mahalalel, Jared, Enoch, Methuselah, Lamech, and Noah. So these are the first 10 patriarchs. And of course, when Noah went through the flood, everything was reset. These 10 patriarchs are renowned for their long lives, averaging somewhere around 910 years old. Some, like Methuselah, living up to 969 years. Adam living 930, but some, like Lamech, who only lived 777 years. Some biblical scholars believe that he only lived that long because he died the same year that the flood happened. Now, whether or not he died because of the flood, some biblical scholars think that he lived that long because the Lord was preparing the world for the great flood, and that he wasn't going to flood the world until the great patriarchs all passed except for Noah. Now, Noah was 600 years at the time of the flood, and just 100 years before, he began having his sons, Japheth, Shem, and Ham. They went through the flood with him, they and their wives, and those 8 souls then began the process over of a new set of 10 patriarchs. This second set of patriarchs began with Shem, the people of the name. Shem, Arpachshad, Salah, Eber, Peleg, Reu, Serug, Nahor, Terah, and then Abram. This second set of patriarchs is known for their much lessened lifespans. They went from 900 on average to 200 on average as their ages declined. And Shem, actually, who lived one of the longest of these great patriarchs, outlived Abraham. So that makes 20 in total. Now let's talk just a little bit about the differences between these two groups of patriarchs. So the pre-flood group of patriarchs are typically attributed as being righteous men mostly, and having lived these great long lives as patriarchs of the family of Adam. They likely governed over different tribes of their own people as their family lines grew over these hundreds and hundreds of years, each populating the earth with hundreds, and if not thousands, if not millions of souls before the great flood. One of the things that I find interesting is that there is a prophecy embedded in the names of these patriarchs. Their names haven't changed, and the meaning of these names haven't changed for millennia. But as believers in Jesus Christ, there's a fun prophecy embedded in their names. For example, Adam means man, or in the sense of mankind. And Seth means appointed, as he was appointed as a replacement for Abel when he passed away. Enos means humankind or mortal, as in can die. And Canaan means sorrow or possession. So if you take those 4 names together, they can mean mankind is appointed a mortal possession or a mortal sorrow. But then we have the next set of names. Mahalalel is the blessed God. You'll hear in there the roots of hallelujah, right? And El. Mahalalel is the blessed God. And then Jared, or Yared, means to descend, to come down. The blessed God came down, and Enoch means teaching. or teacher. So the blessed God came down as a teacher or teaching, followed by Methuselah, which means his death shall bring. Now, some ancient writers thought that his death shall bring pointed to the fact that his death would bring the end of the world, because when he died the same year that the world was flooded. And some have pointed to this as a sign of God's grace, that he elongated his life. He was committed not to flood the earth until this great patriarch passed away. Well, in the year that Methuselah died, the flood happened. So his death shall bring, in this case, the flood, but when in scene with the meaning of all the rest of the names, his death shall bring, and then the next name is Lamech, which means the despairing. And then last of all, Noah means comfort. His death shall bring the despairing comfort. Now look at that all together from the beginning. Mankind is appointed mortal sorrow. The blessed God shall come down as a teacher. His death shall bring the despairing comfort. If that isn't a prophecy of the role of Jesus Christ, I don't know what is. And I love that that's there for anyone to see, and that those names have never changed. They're in the earliest versions of the Hebrew text. Even still, to see that as a prophecy, you have to believe that God himself would come down among the children of men, and that he would suffer and die, and that his death would bring comfort to those who are still here, which I believe is the mission of Jesus Christ. Now, the second set of patriarchs, while all of their names do mean something, they don't carry with them any consistent idea from Shem down to Abraham. However, Shem is the current Hebrew word for name, and he is considered to be the beginning of the people of the name and the establishment of this covenant. We talked before about the importance of new names regarding and their association with covenants. In this way, Shem continued the line of the covenant people down to the believer Abraham. But something got derailed, and Arpachshad, which means Ur of the Chaldees, began to waver or vary from this core belief that they had. And he is the beginning of the departure from the faith. So that when Salah and Eber and Peleg and Reu and Serug and Nahor and Terah came along, they all worshipped false gods. And this pattern continued for so long, and this is one of the things that made Abraham so great. For 7 generations before him, his fathers had departed from the worship of the one true God. But Abraham felt a burning inside, and he reasoned with himself that there had to be more, there had to be greater. And there are so many texts. There's a whole body of Abrahamic literature that kind of fleshes out these reasonings that Abraham had as he was coming to faith in the one true God. So, there you have it. 20 names, 20 patriarchs, 10 before the flood, 10 after. I'd love to hear your thoughts on the translations that I've shared with you regarding the meanings of the names of the patriarchs. Let me know if you've heard something different or learned something different. I'd love to compare notes. And if you'd like to see more videos like this, you may like this next video, which is how many wives did Abraham have in the Bible? See you then.